always take, I don't have it here. There was one that was, well, actually I usually take the arms, the muscle arms, and I scratch myself with the muscle arms. That's what I usually do. All right, so we said we had 8 skull bones. So we got these 2 here, which are the
Temporal.
parietal.
Okay.
That's 3. So you got 2 of those, 4, 5. Back here,
Occipital.
occipital. The 2 other ones are the weird ones that you don't know yet. Sphenoid and ethmoid bones. There's just one of each. The sphenoid on this skull, from the side view, you're seeing part of it right here. So if you look at the side, you should see it here. But if you keep turning that bone or the skull upside down, you're actually going to see it. Keep going here and underneath. And if you look on this one, the exploded skull, you can see the extent of this bone. This sphenoid bone is all of this right here and here. It's a bat-shaped bone. Okay, so this is the sphenoid bone. Up here,
That shape.
it's like bat. It's got like little wings to it. And then here, kind of looks like an alien. This is the ethmoid bone. And it's kind of extensive, but you kind of lack it when you see it. Where you're going to see it is you look into the socket of the eyes of your bone. The ethmoid bone, they see it here like an orange. You're going to have the lacrimal bone. The lacrimal bone's a facial bone. But where you're going to figure out the lacrimal bones, because like think tears, you see a little hole right around with the lacrimal bone. Just behind it, you'll see part of the ethmoid bone. But the ethmoid bone is pretty, if you look at that, is a pretty extensive bone, but it's kind of hard to see when you look at it all together. So that's your ethmoid bone. So those are the other 2 that you have. Would you definitely say sphenoid and ethmoid are irregular bones? They're crazy irregular. Okay? So those are irregular bones. Now the temporal bone, if you look at it here, temporal bones are also irregular because look at this. This thing that kind of comes out. So this actually helps to form a joint with the zygomatic bone, which is your cheekbones. But it has this little process called the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. But also, if you notice in the temporal bone, something you already knew: external auditory meatus. Remember, those sound waves are going collected by the pinna and funneled through the external auditory meatus. That's a hole or a canal. That's what meatus means, a canal in the temporal bone. So you should see one on either side of your skull. Do you see it on your skulls? Okay, because I could tag that.
This all like this?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Does it kind of look around where the ears would be? Okay, so you see that. Also, you'll notice, you can see it on a side view, or if you look it upside down, you'll see this little sharp little process called the styloid process. Styloid process is part of the temporal bone. Styloid process is a very generic term. You'll see styloid process associated with more than one bone. It's kind of think of a stylus, like a pen or a pencil, something you write with. It's kind of a pointed process. So this is the styloid process where we have attachment for various like muscles associated with it. So you see a styloid process in either side. So you should see that. Now also, if you take that skull and you look at it underneath, okay, so look at your skull underneath, and we're going to look at another process. You can see it on the side too. You see it here and here. Those are called the mastoid process. Mastoid process, they're going to be involved in where attachment of some muscles for chewing. So mastoid process. You see that, and that's again associated with the temporal bone. So mastoid process is part of the temporal bone. If you look underneath, you should also see the foramen magnum. You already know that. Why is that there? The The spinal cord comes out through that opening. Also, and that's, you'll see, and this is actually part of the occipital bone, you see these occipital condyles on either side, these little kind of smooth surfaces. That forms a joint with your first cervical vertebra. So the term condyle is a term we use for places where we have an articulation or a joint. The condyles, or the occipital condyles, form a joint with your atlas, which is your first cervical vertebra. It is a synovial joint. It allows you to nod your head, or I should say it allows for flexion and extension. That joint. Yep. Okay? So it allows for flexion and extension. So when we talk about the vertebra, see the atlas is your first cervical vertebra, and we talk about intervertebral discs, you don't have a disc between the occipital condyle and your first cervical vertebra, because then that's a slightly movable joint. This is a synovial joint. So there's no disc there. Okay? You won't even find a disc between C1 and C2, but that's another synovial joint. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So those are your cranial bones and some associated markings that you need to be aware of. Then we have to look at the fascia bones. Okay, so fascia bones, we'll look at different views, side view, front view, and look at, so how many fascia bones did we say? We have to count them all. 14. Okay, so